Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my first, oh dang, that was almost a disaster at the onset. My first live business mastery webinar for Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not gonna try to claim to be a black belt in every business, but I'm a black belt in one business, and that is the business of changing lives with Jiu-Jitsu. Now, as I posted about my intention in doing this and having this live webinar, many people were like, Rener, what's wrong with you? Why are you having a live webinar on teaching Jiu-Jitsu, CTC business, all your success, Gracie University success systems? Why are you doing that in the middle of the storm? Now, it's no coincidence that it's actually very cloudy and raining outside right now. But I don't mean that literal storm. I mean the storm of coronavirus and the challenges we're facing as a country and as a planet right now. Why talk about Jiu-Jitsu? You can't teach Jiu-Jitsu, and that's true. You can't do anything. You can't get on an airplane, you can't get in a hotel, you can't eat at a restaurant, you gotta maintain the distance from everybody, right? So it's challenging for every industry right now, and just know that I'm not speaking to you guys right now for right now, right? That's not what I'm doing. I'm speaking to you guys right now so that when we inevitably come out of this storm, you come out with knowledge, a skill set, and maybe even the qualifications to own your own business. Because like I mentioned, part of the benefit of owning your own business is when times get tough, you weather the storm and you don't get laid off because you're the boss. Now, I'm really speaking to three, potential audiences today. Right? That's what I want to talk to you about. But before I get into exactly these audiences, I want to talk about what me and Hidon came into. I was like 18, he was 20 years old, right? We took over Gracie Academy, the original Gracie Academy, which is right down the street on Carson Street here. And 18 and 20 years old, we took over Gracie Academy. Hoist went off to do his own thing. My dad was already semi-retirement, and here we were, ready to run a school. And we were kids kind of thrust into this. We had about 200 plus students at the time, and we were like, man, this is tough. So we ran it for a couple years there, kind of trying to gather ourselves and figure it out. And then we figured it out. And these are the systems that I'm going to share with you today. The systems that took us from just over 200 students to over 700 students in 18 months during that period that Hidon and I were leading as young instructors at the time. Fast forward a few years, we launched GracieUniversity.com, and today we have over 200,000 members in 196 countries. Then we start certifying instructors, and in less than 10 years, we achieve 170 certified training centers. We effectively scaled the unscalable martial art, because up until we had cracked the code on this, it was a disaster, you guys. People would show up and leave twice as quickly. It was so hard to keep students on the mat. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just kind of thrown into leadership positions there. But now that we've cracked the code, we want to share how we scaled the unscalable martial art. And the reason is because much of what we're going to share with you, if you already own a school, can be immediately deployed in your school. If you don't own a school, it's going to give you an idea of what's possible with Jiu-Jitsu right now once we get out of the storm here. But the point is, there's three potential audiences I'm speaking to right now. And I think all of you fall into one of these three. If you're taking the time to join this webinar, it's because you're either A, you own a BJJ school currently. I don't know what your rank is, I don't know what your affiliation is, but I know you own a school and you teach Jiu-Jitsu, and you're tuning in because you want to hear Rener talk about what can help you take your own school to the next level. Because here we have well over 1,000 students, we have CTCs that are approaching the same, and it's like, we've cracked that code, so you want to learn the secrets. And I'm here to share those with you if you already own a BJJ school. If you're not a BJJ school owner, you're a BJJ dreamer, okay? So we talk about school owners as one possibility, okay? There's Robbie in Australia. School owners as one possibility, BJJ school owners. The other category is traditional martial arts school owners. Many of you watching right now are hearing about the Jiu-Jitsu buzz. Maybe you even dabble yourself, you even practice yourself, but you own a traditional martial arts school and you're kind of frustrated by the state of the situation because Jiu-Jitsu is growing so rapidly that you're like, man, I need to start teaching Jiu-Jitsu in my school or I'm going to lose students to someone who does. And now let me give you a little wake-up call. If you're not already teaching Jiu-Jitsu in your martial arts school, you're already losing students to someone who is. Let that resonate. It's already happening. So you're tuning in, hopefully, to say, man, what can I do to retain those students and to grow my traditional martial arts school, but also to add Jiu-Jitsu to the menu so I have this offering that is in such high demand right now. There's no doubt about it. Or you're part of the third category, the BJJ students and daydreamers. You guys are the ones who, like Johnny here, sit at your desk, you work a regular job. Maybe right now you're sitting at home more than at your desk. But in a normal, non-storm situation, you're sitting at your desk, you do your job, but all you're thinking about is when you can leave your job and get back to jiu-jitsu class tonight, right? And this might be from your first class. You might be a white belt with no stripes and be like, can't wait to get to class. Or you might be deep in the game, right? Training for a couple years and you're like, man, I just wish I could do jiu-jitsu all day, every day. If you fall into that I love jiu-jitsu and I hate my job category, you're also who I'm speaking to today. And if you love jiu-jitsu just a little bit and you love your job, hey, you might find a blend of the tips and strategies we're gonna share here, very useful for you as well in terms of what's possible. For these guys right here, what I want them to see in today's presentation is, look, other people who've been in the exact same chair, have made the transition, have opened CTCs, certified training centers, are teaching jiu-jitsu as blue belts, purple belts, brown belts. They don't have to be black belts. Black belts want you to think that you have to be a black belt to teach jiu-jitsu. They would love that to be the truth, right? But it's not the truth. And I'm gonna show you several examples today and you're gonna go, all right, this is crazy, right? You just have to love people, love jiu-jitsu, and have a sound, proven system to follow, and you can teach as a blue belt or higher, okay? So here we are. Those are our three crowds, and the question is, what needed to happen? So when I talked about scaling the unscalable martial art, what I mean is we found a way to take jiu-jitsu, which is very low retention, very high attrition typically for students, one of the most effective martial arts on the planet, but one of the highest dropout rates of any martial art that ever existed. So we were like, no, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. We need to make it to where the most effective self-defense system on the planet also has the most effective retention and systems keeping students on the mat. So basically we deployed a 3-phase rollout strategy to scale this unscalable martial art. And phase 1 was to structure the martial art. But in order to understand the reason why structuring jiu-jitsu was so important, you have to understand where we were starting from, because we needed to change the why, the what, the when, and the how. All of those had to be changed for jiu-jitsu in order for it to scale. Let's start with the why. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a very young martial art, less than 100 years old, right? Since Hélio and Carlos started in Brazil, and then their students and their kids, and then the rollout, and then the Brazilian Revolution, and then coming to America in 1970. It's a very young martial art. And it exists as both a self-defense system, proven at every level on Brazil and worldwide, as a self-defense system, and it exists as a sport. It exists as both. And unfortunately today, most schools of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu focus, if not exclusively, almost entirely on the sportive practice of jiu-jitsu. That is, the time limits, the points, the techniques that are designed exclusively for competition, grappling, but would never be applied in a real street fight. That's the vast majority of BJJ schools today. What's the problem with that? Students who come to a school because they saw it effective in a real fight, they saw a Gracie challenge match, Hoist in UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, and they saw, wow, I want to, with the little guy beat the big guy, that real fighting system, I want to learn that. So they're showing up at BJJ schools, and when they get there, what they're learning does not resemble what they saw on TV or YouTube. That's where the discrepancy is. And how long do you think a student practices something that does not resemble in any way what they fell in love with on TV before they go, all right, 3, 4 classes later, they say, I don't understand how this has to do with that. And they quit and they never come back, and that's the end of their jiu-jitsu journey. So that was the one disconnect, was that jiu-jitsu had to be delivered in the form that was desirable and matched the student's expectation of what they came looking for in jiu-jitsu, which is fighting effectiveness first and foremost. There are exceptions to that, but I'm talking about the 99%. The other challenge of jiu-jitsu up until this point is that advancement through jiu-jitsu, not just belt advancement, but I'm talking about like just growth and climbing through one level to the next. In any situation, in 99% of BJJ schools, advancement in jiu-jitsu has always been so subjective and just kind of arbitrary, and it is, and you just kind of, there's been no objective advancement guidelines or promotion standards and processes. And as a result, students get very frustrated. Americans especially, and I know I'm talking to the whole world right now, but I know because I grew up here, I quickly realized as a young man, I'm like, wow, students are quitting because they're coming to school here, and basically imagine going to a college, a university, like for real, Stanford University, and you get there and you say, professor, what do I need to do to graduate and get my degree? And the professor says, just keep coming to class, just hang around, and you're gonna be okay. Sounds crazy. But that's what's done at every BJJ school. Teacher, what do I need to do to go to from the beginner classes to the advanced classes? Just hang around. Teacher, what do I need to do to get my next stripe or my next belt? Just hang around. And listen, I know there's some, trial by fire. You just got to be tough. Only the strong survive mentality in BJJ schools. And that's great, but that's not for the 95%. That's for the 5%. And what I'm trying to teach you guys is how do you talk to the 95% of people who absolutely want and need jiu-jitsu, but aren't capable of going through the neck-breaking 6 months that you're telling them to go through in order to survive jiu-jitsu and then go. It doesn't make sense. It defeats itself at the onset. If someone doesn't qualify to do jiu-jitsu because your path through the art is so ridiculous, unstructured, sportive, and demanding, and unsafe because a brand new student shouldn't be sparring with 2 weeks of training, then how do we expect to allow jiu-jitsu to reach the people who actually need it the most? It doesn't. So these were the two problems. Structure, right? It's a street versus sport structure, and then of course the advancement structures that exist or didn't exist in BJJ. Now here's what's crazy. I'm a culprit of both of these violations. We did this, right? When we came to America and started teaching here and I was a kid and then we came up, uncles and dad, it was very loose. It was very much survival of the fittest and there was no guideline. You would never say, hey, what do I have to do to go to the advanced class? They look at you and say, back in line. Okay, never ask another question. And you just go and survive jiu-jitsu until one day they go, you, go to that class over there. Yes, the one out of the 100 students who's still there from that pod of new students. So these are the problems. We violated them. We made so many mistakes. Now there's new BJJ schools opening every day and are making these mistakes and they'll make them for the next 10, 15 years until they realize that what I'm talking about is undeniably true in order to allow jiu-jitsu to reach the most people who actually need it. So now that we understand the why, then the question is, what did we do to solve this problem? And the answer is structure. Capital letters, all structure. What we did is we realized that a brand new student needs consistency, structure, safety, and a concise curriculum that they can see the beginning and the end. And then they have to be able to work through that. And that came in the form of Gracie Combatives, you guys. 36 techniques, 70 plus individual variations, and the consolidation of what we believe to be the most important techniques of all of jiu-jitsu. Now, jiu-jitsu has 1,000 or more techniques. What we realize is a brand new student who's gonna get in a street fight 6 months from now doesn't need 1,000 techniques. That student needs 36 lessons, 70 techniques to defend themselves. Punch block series, clinching, mount control, guards, bottom, submissions, triangles, top, bottom, the basics, distance management, punch protection, energy efficiency from the top, from the bottom, and all the core positions in the fight. Survival mindset. And this was very strongly correlated with the work we did with the US Army in the early 1990s and 2000s when we refurbished the US Army Combatives program, right? We helped in that process. These are the techniques we shoved their way because they asked us, hey, we don't have all this time. What can we teach a soldier in the least amount of time that gives them maximum combat effectiveness? That's where the name Gracie Combatives was born. So Gracie Combatives, now here's what's wild. For me and my brother Hidon, to have come to an agreement, look, two Gracies, two egos, come together and agree on one beginning curriculum was a death match, you guys. Could you guys imagine how crazy it was? For us to say, look, I want to show these 36, and Hidon says, no, I want to show these 23 over here. No, I want to show this. For us to settle on the same was crazy. And imagine if other family members around the world were in the same room, other uncles and family members of ours were in the same room, and we all had to agree on 36 techniques that comprise the tree trunk of jiu-jitsu for every student we would teach from there on out. How difficult that would be. And probably impossible. People might, there would be serious hospitalizations. So what happens is we did this. Me and Hidon came to this agreement for the greater good, right? I had a preference. He had a preference. He said, I'll let mine go if you let. It was compromised, and we agreed. And once we agreed on these 36 techniques, 23 classes, and the best part is you don't have to do them in order. You can come whenever you want, no sequential completion requirement. So you come, you learn 2 techniques. Each student has their own card. This is Ruben's card. He comes to class, he learns his techniques, he gets a little mark, and he doesn't have to come in order because each lesson is taught with no prerequisite for the student, meaning we teach it to the lowest common denominator. Anybody with no experience will understand every single lesson when it shows up on the calendar. The point is, by us agreeing on this structure, every time Ruben come to a certain class, it would be taught the exact same way. And that consistency felt safe and allowed him to progress at a rate and through a process that was comforting for him. So here's how it looks. Let's say Ruben has done 3 classes. Over here, you can see that he's done class number 4, class number 13, and class number 18. And then over here, we have also, so these are their individual class trackers. There's 3 boxes next to each lesson because the student has to do no less than 3 times each individual lesson before they complete the program, right? Which there's a test at the end of all this. Stripe 1, 20 lessons at least. So once they hit the 20 lessons, we begin considering them for stripe promotion. But we want to make sure that at least a bare minimum. So if someone is super talented and very athletic, and they 5 lessons later, the teacher's like, wow, he has a wrestling background, let's just give him a stripe. No, let him go through the time, let him go through the process. So minimum 20, nothing before that to make sure that we award that progress at the right time. But let's say that Ruben is having a grand old time and he's missing. So what happens is the students bring their cards to class real quick. The students bring their card to class. We store it here at GU or at any CTC. They bring it. It already has all their check marks on it because we update it here at the front desk, the receptionist. So they use it as they pair up in the beginning of class as a review guide. Because otherwise, students get so frustrated, you guys. They come to class, they see a move, they see a sweep tomorrow, armbar the next day, guard pass the next day. It keeps getting more and more confusing every class they come to because they have more moves that they're learning that they're forgetting. By having an external hard drive, an actual card that the students can actually refer to and they can hold, and there's something outside their brain that takes responsibility for tracking their progress through the curriculum. Think about how comforting that is for a brand new student. Anyone who's watching who's done combatives, I don't gotta sell you. I'm talking to everyone else who's been through BJJ the hard way and goes, yeah, as a beginner, it actually sucked to come for a week or 2 and then remember that I don't know when we're gonna see that sweep again, let alone the 10 that I already forgot. Right? So with Gracie Combatives, it's a cyclic program where it goes over and over again. And then what happens is we have the Combatives calendar so that every single student knows which lessons are taught every single day of the month. Imagine that. So if you're missing a lesson, you go, wow, when is it? And you pull this calendar out and that controls the when of your Gracie Combatives experience. You pull out your calendar and let's say you're missing lesson number 7, right? Check this out. Missing lesson number 7, what do? Oh, look, July 2nd, lesson number 7 at 6:30 p.m. So now they know that on the side over here, that's gonna be lesson number 7, and the curriculum on the calendar that gets sent out and posted online every month is the same as the one that's on their card. So if they're missing class number 7, they say, okay, great, I'm gonna come on July 2nd, 6:30 p.m., and I'm gonna get my class number 7. And then when they do, they actually show up. It's class number 7 right there. They show up, and this, look at this, card turns into that. Class number 7 gets checked off. They get an additional class on their card over here. So they keep climbing through the curriculum in this manner. So this is how it works, you guys. When someone has this much control of their progress, you can imagine how they can decide when they want to show up. If they're missing a class, they can come accordingly. If they forget a technique, they can say, hey, teacher, what was this move? Lesson number 7, what's a triangle? Choke? Haymaker punch defense? What is that? I learned it. It says I learned it, but I forgot. The teacher simply comes in and says, yo, I got you. They pair up. They go with them during the review period at the beginning of every class. There's a 10, 15-minute review. The teacher shows them the techniques. Everyone's happy because we can retain it. But imagine this didn't exist. How would the teacher, they say, I forgot a move. It was a chokey move, and there was kind of a move of a punch. The teacher goes, well, I don't even know what you're talking about, so I can't help you review. Never again. So ownership of information for a beginner is the number one thing. They have to feel like they can hold on to that which they're learning. And more importantly, that every single class they come to, the technique resembles a situation that they could contemplate themselves being involved in a real fight. Imagine if they came for 2 weeks and every move they saw had no resemblance to a real fight. 0. Grabbing, twisting, gi, slipping, doing, up. Imagine if that was the experience for 2 weeks straight. You can imagine the frustration of the student saying, hey, teacher, at what point do I learn how to block a punch when someone's in my guard? Teacher's gonna look at him and go, maybe next week? Better question, teacher, when was the last time you taught how to block a punch from the guard? That's the honest question, right? Because then the teacher's gonna say, well, it's maybe been a couple years. What do we do? That means it's gonna be 2 more years before you get that valuable. It can't happen. The first thing you learn is the hardest to forget. If I'm gonna forget anything that I know, I'm gonna forget all the sport jiu-jitsu moves that I've learned and mastered over the years, and 100% Gracie Combatives, life or death, that's what I need. That's how we created this program. All right, so now the question is, the only thing more important than making sure that it's 100% street and that the student has 100% ownership of not only their progress, but what they need to do to go to the next level. Because once they complete this card, it's fully filled out, and they've done at least 8 months, combatives, reflexes, they can take a Gracie Combatives test, right? Once you master all these, group class, private classes, you can take a Combatives test. And if you pass that test, you earn your Gracie Combatives belt. And with that belt, you go into the master cycle, you start focusing on sparring and more intense and more sportive techniques for Jiu-Jitsu against Jiu-Jitsu, as well as more street techniques, the remaining 1,000 techniques of Jiu-Jitsu. That happens after you earn your Combatives belt. That's the qualifier. So the only thing more important than the structure and the street applicability of our beginner curriculum was to make sure that no matter what teacher taught the techniques, it was always taught the same. Because me and Hidon, there was a time where our father said, no, nobody else can teach, only Hidon and Henrik can teach class. And it was good because we were killing the connection and we grew, but it was limiting because then we couldn't travel, we couldn't do seminars, we very limited GSTs, very limited, private class, other things that we could possibly grow. Creating GU online, none of this would have been possible if we were restricted to teaching every single class. So growth of a business requires, right, you have to multiply yourself and have other people capable of doing the exact same thing. Well, guess what? We went for it. So now I'm going to share something with you guys that I'm not supposed to share this one. This is when we call it Gracie Family Secrets. Technique-wise, there are none. We've shared them all. It's all on gracieuniversity.com. But this one, I've never shared with the open public, and I'm going to do it right now. And it's so major, you guys. We created what's called the slice presentation formula. Now, when you have Gracie Combatives, every single technique is a trap and roll. Trap and roll has a number of slices: standard variation, punch block variation, headlock variation for Gracie Combatives lesson number 1. Those are three variations are slices. Slicing makes it easier for the student to learn. When you teach an individual slice, you have to adhere to the slice presentation formula here at Gracie University, back then Gracie Academy. That's a requirement. So we got a group of very dedicated students and we said, hey, you guys could all be great instructors. Come on, we want to train you. And we taught them the slice presentation formula to ensure consistency amongst teaching groups and making sure that no matter who taught any class, they learned SPF and they all followed the same teaching formula. I'm going to go through it briefly. You're going to learn it in much greater detail when you come through instructor certification program on your way to becoming a certified instructor. So every single presentation starts with an introduction. Right, it's the beginning of every slice presentation. When you get on stage, think of SPF as you get on stage to show a move. We have a formula for that. Introduction has the frame, the problem, and the forecast. The frame is context. Always give context of the situation so that the newest students understand what you're talking about. The problem is basically what life is like without jiu-jitsu in that situation. You have to show, for mount, for example, a student needs to see what would go wrong from the bottom of the mount in order to appreciate what goes right once you learn that slice. And then there's the forecast. Forecast is the anticipation of future slices in the lesson so that the students don't ask a bunch of questions early on. It's basically saying, hey guys, we're going to see the standard variation of the trap and roll. Then I'm going to show you the headlock variation and the punch block variation in the next couple slices. Now all of a sudden the student knows that I'm going to cover punches and headlocks later, so don't ask about those right now. That's called the slice forecast. Every introduction must have that. After the introduction, we go to the demonstration. It's time to show the move. There are 4 types of demonstrations: silent demo, detailed demo, bad guy demo, and solo demo. Silent, detailed, bad guy, solo. Very important demonstrations. And basically the silent demo is one time doing the technique to where people go, wow, that was dope. It's the hook demo. It's the one that keeps it simple and exciting so the student wants to learn it. This is when you actually show the actual technique. Number 2, detailed demos. Detailed demos is when you actually explain the technique. And there are essentially 3 detailed demos. There's a what demo, a how demo, and a why demo. What demo is very brief. You show the most basic details. The how demo gets a little deeper in how you're doing the technique, and the why demo goes even deeper in terms of why the technique is being done the way it is. And if you don't do this, this might happen. What, how, and why. So 3 detailed demos are going to go down. After that, you do a bad guy demo. You switch roles with your partner. You have your partner do the move on you. So now you are the bad guy for your partner on stage in front of the whole class. What's the benefit of this? You're teaching your partner, you're teaching the audience how to be a good bad guy for their partner, because beginners don't even know how to grab someone in a headlock or throw a punch or act in a way that's realistic. So you got to teach them during the bad guy demo. And finally, you have the solo demo. Do the move one time by yourself. You're here for the triangle. Cross your legs, pull the arm across, get this, lock it over, controls. By doing the move solo, students will often see details and subtleties that they didn't see when you were partnered with your training partner on stage. After that, we go into the drill orders, you guys. Very important. Drill orders. Starting position, repetitions, reverse rolls. It's very important that you tell people how to drill the technique. Okay, guys, we're going to do the elbow escape from the mount. We're going to start from the bottom of the mount. We're going to conduct 2 repetitions of the elbow escape all the way to close guard, and then we're going to reset and switch top to bottom. Reverse rolls, let your partner do it. At that point, they get 2 cycles as well. So, you know what I'm saying? Starting position, rep count, reverse rolls. And then finally, the release reminders. This is so important because it's called give feedback, ask questions, slow motion, help each other. This is so important. We call it GASH, okay? GASH. The reason you need these is because there's a default energy from a brand new student that because we're learning how to fight, they need to fight to learn. They're wrong. You don't got to kill each other to progress in jiu-jitsu. So GASH, give feedback, means help each other. You always want to remind the students, guys, give each other feedback. Ask questions, you guys. We love questions. Slow motion. You don't have to go fast. Smooth is fast. When you're just learning, it's all about retention. Go slow through the technique until we intensify later. And then help each other. At that point, they all work together. So those energy, that vibe is critical. Friends, we taught this to our instructors in Torrance, Gracie Academy original, in early 2000 and mid 2002. We taught this. After we were confident that they all tested out on this, we deployed them to let them start teaching combatives classes and helping out in other classes on the schedule. And that mixed with basically the implementation of combatives, this SPF, these teaching methodologies, the structure that it all added, guess what? That's when we went from 200, give or take, to over 700, about 750 students in 18 months. It was like this, you guys. It was so gnarly and so exciting and so fun to have experienced that. And all because we added structure to the equation. And we were so confident that our system in GU was sound and was rock solid, that a couple years later, once it was so solid and the growth was just unprecedented for us, is when we finally said, okay, it's time to scale this to the world.